Welcome to Restore the Glory podcast. My name is Jake Kim.
And I'm Bob Schutz.
We're two Catholic therapists sharing what we've learned personally and professionally to help you on the journey of restoration.
If you've been blessed by our podcast, please prayerfully consider partnering with us on Patreon. Your support will help cover the cost to produce the podcast, but will also give you access to exclusive content like monthly reflections and special live stream teachings. Go to patreon.com/restoretheglory and join the mission of experiencing the restoration of our God-given glory.
Hey, Bob. Good to see you again. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Jake. Excited for this.
I know where you're about to go.
Where am I about to go?
You're about to talk about our cornhole score from our last retreat together, aren't you?
And what happened?
I've repressed that memory. I need healing. And so I haven't gotten to be able to work with that yet. So sorry.
You have been ragging me on our podcast for the last two times. So I just want to say that it's shifted this time.
The turns have tabled the tide, whatever you call it. Bob was massively victorious this past week. And it's because he has new cornhole bags and he rigged them somehow. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. Some of them have magnets in them and they moved. I saw some weird stuff happening, but anyway, this is not a cornhole podcast, but good job. You were victorious. You destroyed me and it was fun to play.
Yeah. More importantly, the priests all benefited from the conference last week. And so it was a great day.
It was a great, we kind of joke that it's a cornhole tournament with a side of conference, but that's not actually what goes on. Anyway, so Bob, we are continuing on in our series here about the medical profession and healing through the medical profession. And we have another guest with us that I'm super excited to talk to. Bob, who's with us today?
Good friend and somebody who's been just such a gift to me is Dr. Chuck Leitz, or Dr. Charles Leits, depending on whether his personal or professional name. I'll just give you a little background. And you don't know much of this, Jake, so this will be new to you too.
Yeah.
So Chuck and his wife and his children have gone to conferences, but he and his wife and his daughter and son-in-law came to an I Am prayer ministry training. And Chuck, as a good holistic doctor, noticed that I was in trauma breathing.
Huh.
You know, we talked a little bit about that last time with Dr. Tom. And so he came up to me and he said to that, I said, yeah, I just get fatigued and I start to get into that. And he says, well, I can help you. So he brought me into one of the rooms and started working on my body in a similar way, different from Dr. Tom, but in a similar way that Dr. Tom helps me, helps us on our retreat. And so he's been now to 2 other conferences since then, and we've been able to meet up, and he's been able to help me and do some blood tests and find out where nutrients need to be helped and everything. So he's been just a great gift and just such a good heart. You know, one of his mentors is Dr. Goodheart, but I think he got his good heart from the Lord. So Chuck, welcome, and we're really excited for you to share because I know what's been happening in your practice. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. This is exciting, and little did I know. So I've been doing this now for, I've been treating patients a little over 40 years now. My wife and I have been married 46 years. We have 8 children, and the 23rd and 4th grandchildren are due here in April, and life is rich and full. But it all started with our firstborn, the one that attended that conference that I Am training. And it was a happenstance thing. I was out in Arizona, physical therapy major is what I was going for. An event happened with our newborn baby, really sick and so forth. Somebody set us up with this person for a place to stay one night when we were trying to see my grandmother in California. And he was a doctor. And he said, can I help? Because I can see your baby's in trouble. And we agreed to that.
Whoa.
It was like 5 minutes, a miracle cure. And I just went, well, I guess, to be honest with you, the first time we've ever been in California, we drove up this famous highway. I think it's A1A or whatever they call it. We didn't even notice the highway. No. All we could talk about for the next 2 hours is what just happened to our daughter. And I said to my wife, I hope I got a lot of schooling behind me already. I'm really far along. I go, I think maybe I have to change directions. And if I could help one person in my life, like I was, she was just help. My wife says, there's no choice here. You have to do this. And that's what began the journey. Dr. Goodhart came along I went down to Atlanta and was going to school there, met him. He's pretty internationally famous, and he treated all Olympic athletes, all these world-class athletes, and just about everything you can imagine. I mean, he's just an all-around doctor. And for 25 years, I did a lot of studying under him, and for 25 years, I saw him once a month. He died a number of years ago. I don't remember the year exactly, but beautiful man, and served to the end of his life. He was a strong Catholic, just a beautiful man, and probably his name said it all, Dr. Goodhart. Anyway, as a result, but I did start my practice in 1983 in this area in Michigan, and I've always prayed with my patients. At the time, I'd actually pray out loud with each and every one of them, and that was a beautiful thing. I got so busy and so crowded that sometimes you'd offend people a little bit, or some people uncomfortable. So all I would do basically is before I go into a room, I never walk in a room without blessing that room and asking the Lord to precede me every day, every time. It's been a really beautiful thing. I mean, it's been Christ-centered from the beginning. It has been. In fact, the first name of our clinic was Action, and it's awesome. A Christian to investigate others' needs. It was always based on that. But it's just my name now, and my son practices with me for the last 15 years. The cool part, I guess, is how God works in such mysterious ways. Is one of my daughters, her husband suddenly died and left her with 2 children, and she was in a tailspin. And in that tailspin, we're trying to figure out what to do as a family to help her. So we all collectively gathered around and said, what are we going to do? Well, my oldest daughter somehow got acquainted with your book, Be Healed. That led to going to Healing the Whole Person conference. We all went to that, and we started. And then the beautiful Sean and Liz, Sean and Liz pretty well, and over in Lansing here. My gosh, what a gift. So we started seeing them as well, and they were just, the healing started happening in our family. And as of today, every single one of my kids have gone through the Healing the Whole Person.
Wow.
And every single most of them have done the Unveiled. So what happened anyway, we got launched into that, and this scripture jumped out at me where it says, we are body and soul. And that was a huge turning point, because in my practice, just so you know how it works, is Dr. Goodhart was very big on the fact that we're not just chemical, and we're not just structure, and we're not just mental. We're all of those put together.
Right.
And you got to treat the whole person. You can't isolate things and mitigate things down to these simple levels, because they're not. And what I do is I treat the central nervous system. And every time I treat somebody, we make measurements on everything from diaphragmatic breathing to parasympathetic, sympathetic balances. We just go through everything, because you always want to leave it better than you found it, that nervous system. But the amazing thing happened in the course of working with, talking to Bob and working with the patients. And after we did the IM training, I noticed something interesting. I always thought we're body and soul, but I was separating those two. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, like, wait a minute, that's the missing link. The band around the body turns to dust soon enough. The band around it all is that soul, that eternal soul. And so we started doing prayers with patients and going through Emmanuel moments and whatnot. I have a system that we do. And what I started noticing is that physical changes were happening with the patient. So you might have somebody who walks into your office and they're posturally, they're really twisted and crooked. Okay, so I got to back up. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it. It's good.
Dr. Goodhart, in World War II, he was a fighter pilot in World War II. And he was the youngest major in the Air Force at that point ever. But he was a fighter pilot in Germany. And a bunch of things happened. And there was a major traumatic incident where a plane came through their tent and killed everybody in the tent and splattered them onto him.
Oh, gee.
But When the plane came in the middle of the night, everybody sat up. Some hand pushed him down and pushed him back onto his cot. And right when he was on the cot, all the other guys that were sitting up went through the propeller of the airplane, flattered over him. So he's telling me this story. And he said, at that time, a psychologist named John Diamond, I don't know if you know him. I guess he was pretty famous at one time. But irregardless, he helped Dr. Goodhart with this emotional recall, this traumatic recall technique. Dr. Goodhart taught that to me. Well, what I have observed is that was like immense. A patient had a daughter die or something traumatic happen. We would do this to help them. Then I started noticing if you treated a patient, treated their central nervous system, it would come back. And I'm one of those guys that doesn't like to do things twice. If you have to do it again, why am I doing this again? Why does the body want to keep reverting back to this? And so I started noticing that if I would have the patient recall their injuries or their traumas, and I would do my adjustments, my treatments on the patient while they're recalling that, then they would hold. It was like, wow. So that was just something I on my own did.
Wow.
Then fast forwarding at that, I go through this IM training and I started noticing there was a way of differentiating trauma, physical trauma, one that would connect just to some accident or injury versus the more important one. It's kind of like that. When you see somebody, you give them bad news and they bury their head in their hands, that oh my gosh, that grief.
Yeah.
These are our emotional centers on our forehead that are very active trigger points. They're very important. And so I started noticing that if we could identify these emotional centers when they would be an active neurological reflex, they'd have a neuromuscular response. Testing those, we could see then that there was actually more than just an injury recall, but it was a trust issue. And that one's the one that blew me away. And I went, okay, so trust is a big deal. I mean, starting with Adam and Eve, and we're going forward. I'm going, okay, so trust, and then these people, they bring in all their vows. But now I started with the patients, I would go, and this is what's so crazy is that, they're used to what I've done for so many long years. And now in the last several years, I'm doing this. And I'll say to the patient, I've actually identified that this is the point where I can't do much for you except kind of be this liaison or this kind of help facilitate. This is where I got to step out and God has to step in because you have something happen in your life, trust between you and parent, spouse, God, yourself. You lost trust someplace.
Wow.
Nobody has ever refuted me yet. They've said, no, that's not, or that can't be, or I don't want to go there. They're all interested. Irregardless, it's so funny how many times when we do this, the patient will lay there and I'll help facilitate, but we just bring God in, let the healing happen. It's amazing to me how many times you remove a block somewhere, maybe an inner vow or something, remove that block, and when they say, no, everything's fine, floodgates open and they're pouring out, their tears but then when I got done, I haven't treated them physically, done all the physical treatments. You stand them up and that crooked posture is now level. I'm going, what? How did that happen?
Wow.
The diaphragm that wouldn't breathe, wouldn't move. Now it's opened up. And I'm going, oh my gosh, there's a lot more to this than the body and soul. So what I started realizing is I'm not treating the soul, I'm not treating the body, but it's all one. And if we separate that, as doctors, we're failing. As therapists, we're failing. We need to treat it all. And then it got even deeper yet, where we started discovering the layers. A patient said to me that she heard the idea that it's like a book. The book's closed, but if you open it so that the cover and the back of the book come together, our lives are like all that circular of pages, or Goodhart would always say we're like layers of an onion, we're just peeling layers. So what I started noticing is that physical problems I couldn't find the source of them until you healed that trust or that particular one.
Yes.
Or you couldn't get to the trust until you fix that physical something was holding up, physical, blocking that trust. So that body and soul is a big deal. You had to fix them both. You can't. You have to be paying attention to everything, and in that body, you have to be paying attention to the chemistry, and the physical, the mental, the structural, because it's all intertwined. And this whole body and soul is so much bigger than we thought. And I recently saw the Casey and Callie Means when they talked to, I don't know if you saw Tucker Carlson in an interview, but one of their great things that they brought out, which is what we've been saying forever, is you can't, all these subcategories, my specialty is hangnails. I mean, you can't reduce it down to such simplistic things. We are big. We are everything. And as soon as you change one, you change the other. You change the chemistry. It's like the central nervous system. You cannot touch it without affecting everything. For years, I would tell my patients, it hurts here, doc, and I'm treating someplace else. Why are you there? Because it's all connected. And then the patient would say, but what about my shoulder? And I go, can you walk out the door and leave anything behind? As soon as you move, it all moves. Everything works together as a team. And it's met a lot of resistance, not in my office, but as you know, out in the medical world, that's not been accepted. Everything is like a specialist for everything, right? And
yes,
when in reality, doctors should be treating the whole body. They should be treating the whole system. And so in this process now, we've been able to, my biggest problem is time. I don't have enough time because people, and as you know, you don't fix a trust issue and then everything's well. It's years ago, I spoke at some churches and stuff, and I would say, I always gave this example. We have like this rubber band connecting us, our umbilical cord to God, right? We have one strap, but we got these thousands of these rubber bands connected to the earth, the world. Satan's got them, whatever. And our lives are spent healing, clipping these rubber bands. And the more you clip that one to God, you draw closer. You're pulled farther from the earth, closer to God. And the closer you get to him, the better you hear, the better you see, the better you think. And no longer cataracts removed from the eyes, and you can see truth, because truth becomes that much clearer. But it's a process that has to happen over a lifetime. It's not. Bob has helped me so much with that, because at first I'm a little impatient, and he says, one step at a time, one rubber band at a time, and just clip it, and it'll be good. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, is figure out how my daughter and son-in-law that went through the training as well, they don't have enough hours in the day. There's so many people that want, they understand. They understand. And it's really cool. I mean, God's opening the eyes. I want to be healed. I want to be healed. And they get it.
Wow. We could go in so many different angles. Thank you for that. I feel like I'm situated enough to now maybe ask a question that isn't totally out of the blue. So let me make sure I'm with you and hearing you. So you were in a typical track to become an MD of some kind, and then you have these encounters. What an amazing story with your daughter, and this guy, a doctor, I don't remember, male or female, doesn't matter. A doctor significantly impacts you, and then you go, I've got to change course. And then over the course of your career as a physician, it sounds like you're actually coming to understand the human person as he or she was created to be. And the clearer that you are about the integration and God's design for the human person, the more efficacious your practice became, which isn't always, it doesn't always align with modern Western medicine's view of the human person. And what I'm hearing you distinguish is there's a lot of varying anthropologies out there about what does it mean to be human, and that informs how you respond to people or treat people in a professional sense. So from psychology to medicine, et cetera. And what I'm hearing you say is you have integrated more and more with regard to the human person is not a body-soul split. We're not dualists. The human person is one. We are body souls, however we try to articulate that. And as you honor both simultaneously, people actually experience greater freedom and healing and life in all of those domains and areas. And what it sounds like you've done over the years is that you have extensive training in the physical side, and as your formation and training has increased in the spiritual, emotional side, you're finding more fruit in the people that you work with. Am I hearing that roughly correct?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, right, what really matters? Eternity, right? So at the end of the day, when someone's a little more free, you're not so focused on just here, like just physical here.
Yes.
We're so liberated when what did Augustine say? We're only at rest when we rest in God, and it's that's what happens when you start removing these trust issues are big because they cause fear and they cause every illness you can imagine. So
Yes.
trust is like everything. And could you imagine just treating the physical being and leaving that extensively wounded state there, that mother or father or whoever, all those things that have happened to that person. It really saddens me that so many have never been talked to and touched in that area.
Right.
Let me press in a statement you just made, because I imagine our listeners are going, "What?" So trust issues create disease. Can you play that out? Can you explain that, of how that process works in the human person?
Right. So when that trust is broken, that's a trauma to somebody. I mean, that's like, and when they recognize that, well, they have to carry on, so to speak. They have to reconcile that. So in that process, the person will take that broken trust and they'll create a reason why and a reason how they can justify what happened, or if they can't, how to bury that. So right now, in that emotional center, which is still part of the central nervous system, we are now turning and we're attacking our central nervous system always. That 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old is still inside of us. One of the biggest things, I mean, this happened every day, yesterday, today in the office. You'll find, for example, someone gets in a car accident and their neck's out of position, and you may go in and adjust that vertebrae, but it'll come right back because the body still thinks, that central nervous system still thinks it's in this injury mode. It doesn't know. It's still protecting you. Well, that's what happens when that trust is broken. It's still trying to protect something because we're not really good at being vulnerable, as we all know, and letting things into that darkness. But that's where the light has to come into the darkness. So when we remove that, then you take away all this distress in the central nervous system. And actually, I mean, I think all illness comes from, one of the things they said about disease is it's too much or not enough from nerve energy. And you probably have heard sympathetic, parasympathetic by now. Well, I test every single patient, sympathetic, parasympathetic, where they're at. Almost everybody's in a sympathetic mode. Almost everybody is. Well, that's flight or fight. So you're never getting out of that mode to heal. If you're not in rest and digest mode, that parasympathetic mode, you're not going to heal well at all, unless there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing you. Of course, you want to be sympathetic, but that's the only time. But now saber-toothed tigers are there all day long because of broken trust, because of these things. The body's on red alert. It's not going to have trust broken again. How damaging, how wearing. I think I have a 1973 or 75 National Geographic that was showing all these people living to be 120, 140 years of age. I mean, it's a National Geographic going, visiting all these people. I'm telling you, medicine drugs are keeping people alive longer, but not well. Not well. In fact, that curve's going the other way now. So and if I'm rambling too much here, forgive me. I just get excited about what I've been doing for 40 years and it hasn't changed. But I used to, 35 years ago, a patient said to me, "Doctor, what do I have to do to be healthy, to be well?" Whoa, that's a big question. I actually said, well, wait a minute. I got to think. And I just paused and I go, I have an answer for you. God gave me an answer. I said, play the 5 W's at rest. And then I explained it, what all that meant. Each one meant something. And over the years, everybody's wanted me to write this book on it because that would just help, a great handbook. But I haven't. Praise God I didn't, because it was incomplete. That whole soul part was missing. I can teach about playing and rest and walk, water, watching what you eat, work, and worship. I can cover all that in great detail. And all of those go in great detail. But if you leave out that soul part, we're body and soul. That's what I have.
Amen. Like there's, I'm so intrigued. So, Dr. Chuck, so I'm understanding, I want to almost like visualize what you would do. So let's say that me or somebody comes into the office and we say, I have like terrible back issues and I need some pain medication to make that go away because I can't function. And that's the reason I step in. I'm assuming that's why somebody, correct me if I'm wrong about why that would, if that's what would happen if somebody came in to see you. But what goes through your mind? What goes through your heart? What are you trying to do? And then how maybe would that lead from pain to an emotional, physical pain to an emotional pain?
Right. So what they would come into the office for is everything. I mean, they come in with everything,
Okay.
I don't care if it's cancer. I mean, they just come in. I don't treat diseases. I treat people who have diseases, right?
Gotcha.
So whatever the issue is, they'll come in. We like to look at the basic stuff. Like you want to look at their chemistries. You want to look at their whatever. I mean, it goes on and the structure, their postures, all this stuff. You want to fix all that. You do. Dr. Goodhart used to say structure determines function. So the first thing I want to do is fix their structure as best I can. And that will oftentimes spill over into the chemistry. Unfortunately, today the chemistry has gone bad. I mean, the food and the water, and that's a whole nother subject. But we are, and the amount of drugs, what you said, that I have to take this aspirin to survive, or I have to take these, metformin or whatever they're on to this day, for different things, for blood sugar things. And so right there is your key that you're not addressing the problem. When you give this for that, and you haven't done anything to find out where it's coming from, you're already not on the right page. You fix the structure, you try to realign the chemistry, but when something's wrong, it's the classic patient says, if I don't have my coffee, I can't function. Well, it's very clear then you have a problem and you're not fixing it, and all you're doing is keeping the fire burning. I love that thing, Johnny. Mom, there's smoke in the basement. Shh, quiet, I'm busy. No, and they keep asking. Well, pretty soon you get so tired of Johnny yelling, you put duct tape over his mouth. Good, now there's peace and quiet, but the house is burning down. And that's what we're doing with so much of our therapies today. And I'm not talking about emergency therapy, keeping people alive. That's a different thing.
Yeah,
agreed. So it's very important that we keep this straight. This is healthcare.
Sure.
So in healthcare, there's nothing synthetic in our body. When we're born, we come out natural. There's nothing synthetic in us. And everything, of course, from that point on, it becomes synthetic, what we start doing. That leads to a lot of trouble. So we start with that. Patient comes in, start with those foundational things. But then we do this thing called therapy localization on these emotional centers on the forehead. And I'm kind of prompted a lot of times when to do this by the patient telling me something or saying something. I communicate. I talk to the patients. They don't just come in and I do my thing and leave. That doesn't happen. We communicate. And then in that conversation, I pick up that something is going on. I'll then do this therapy localization over the emotional centers, and we'll do some standardized muscle testing or something to see where they're at. When those parameters change, I know we have a distrust issue. I'll go to what Dr. Bob was saying a minute ago. So, example of a patient. She comes in, she's not doing well, she's got a lot of pain, she can't move her leg, she can't move her knee, doesn't know why, hasn't been able to for a year and a half, and the pelvis is tipped up, and things are just odd. Well, I decided in this case, I structurally did my stuff. Next time I saw her, it didn't change. I mean, some of the stuff held, some of it didn't, but the patient still couldn't move their knee. So then check these emotional centers, and they were positive. So I go, somewhere in your life, something happened with trust where either you lost trust or trust was broken with your parents, your spouse, your kids, somewhere. And I go, does any of this relate? Can you relate to any of this? And she kind of nodded her head, yeah. And I go, you don't even. So now I'm walking you through how I do with the patient. There's a cute part to this, but I say, you don't have to tell me what it is. I don't need to know.
Yes.
God knows everything. I don't need to know anything. So all I need you to do, and we will actually do some testing, and we'll do a lot of parameters, range of motions, all these things to verify. So it isn't I got to be careful. I don't want to offend any doctors and their practices, but we'll do some tests, and I'll have them think about whatever it is that's in their mind.
Yes.
And I always tell them, just say to me, when you can think of something. Don't say okay, say because okay means you're understanding my instructions. Means they still always say okay. So bad on my part. Anyway, when they think, so I'll do these tests, and they sometimes will go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things before the test will show you positive. And when it does, I go, there's the one. That's the one that's the issue that we have to do first. We might have to do the other ones, maybe later, some other time.
Sure.
But God wants that one right now, not the other ones.
So let me see if I'm following. Can I see if I'm following you to this point? So what I'm imagining is I've been to various people, physio and all the various things. So I'm imagining I'm on the table. Let's use my back as an example, but you were mentioning a knee one. You test my hip range of motion, and you say, go through the things. I'm going through my things, and you're testing, and all of a sudden my hip range of motions dramatically changes, and you go, there we go. That's the one where you have, I can tell you have a trust issue because your body is guarding itself. Am I roughly understanding?
Yeah, roughly. So we might look at motion changing there, and we'll also look at a change in a muscle, psoas muscle, or a piriformis muscle sticking to your back. We might use the psoas muscle. And then in that process, though, we have a way of discerning if that muscle is overactive or underactive before we
there. Okay.
Because you have to have something that's in a norm. You got a norm that you're using, which you can find or create in anybody. Then when that muscle maybe say changes, not only range of motion, but actually strength or whatever. When that happens with those emotions, I know there's a trust issue broken somewhere. And and that's when we'll go through it.
And then is at that point that you're inviting, like, Bob, what were we going to say there?
He's touching these emotional centers in the forehead at this point. Right. And he can actually...
physical.
He can actually feel...
Yeah, so there's an actual pulse. You can feel them. They're like an inch down from the hairline, straight up from the eyeball. And you're touching them so lightly, light as if you were to lift a nickel. I mean, just light touch.
Wow, yeah.
And over time, patients, some feel it, some don't. Actually, what's really fascinating is most of these people, when you touch those emotional centers and those pulses, you should feel that they're not even there. But as they work through this process, which I'll quickly describe, when they go through it, these will oftentimes return. But if they don't return, I know there's layers that we still, there's these blocks, these inner vows or these whatever it might be.
Yes.
Identity lies, that kind of stuff. So
yes.
When we identify that there's something going on there, then I'll ask the patient to please go there. Just in their mind, I go, this is where I'm just going to facilitate, but we're letting God do the work. And this is what's so exciting. Yeah. This is the part that's so cool. Yeah. You kind of, every time. And I always thank them because when they do this, they've just healed you and me both. Within this body, we receive healing. And I'm so thankful to these patients for being willing to do this, right? And so what happens is I'll hold these emotional centers because I want them to be set. I want to realign them. I'd say just hold them gently while they go through this. And I say, I want you to go to the deepest, darkest part of it you can. I want you to, don't be afraid of anything. The room's quiet. Just don't be afraid of anything. Go there. And they will. And I'll ask them, so do you feel like you're at the deepest part? Tears run down their eyes often. And yeah. And I go, okay. So now we go to Carl Lehman's work a little bit. And I'll say, okay, so now as you look around the room, and I, identify about what age were you, and they do that. And now, as you look around this room, where's Christ? I always say, I don't really give him an option. I say, he's there. He's always been there. So just tell me where you see him. And if you don't, do you feel him? Can you feel his presence? Recognize his presence? Some people actually, have that ability to visualize and see. Some people don't, right? But
sure.
More people than not actually do. And when they see him, they'll always say, yeah, he's right behind me, he's over there, whatever. So as we have them visualize that, then I say, what is he trying to convey to you? I let them rest with that for a minute. Then I say, what do you think he's trying to convey to you? And they'll always tell me something. And that he is trying to convey something, either by gestures or by words. And then I go back, and let's go back into that room, when you were 5 years old or whatever. How does that feel now? When they go back, if it isn't feeling like, wow, like it's just so peaceful now, or he's let me know he has me, he's got me in his arms. When that happens, I say, there, God just visited you. You just were healed, and we can go back and all that stuff. Example, the lady with the knee. We just did this. We didn't do anything else. A year and a half, she couldn't bend her knee. Boom. Her knee's perfect. She goes, what the heck? Why is my knee working? I go, I don't know.
Wow.
They always ask me, how did this happen? Why is this happening? I go, I don't know. I didn't do the work. God did. It's one of those deals. And of course, a lot of times it's nothing. The patient just was happy to have done it, but they don't know what's happened. We don't know what's happened.
Wow.
All I know is and then these won't come back, by the way. I can go back.
Yes. The forehead
those emotional centers will be fine. They will be fixed. And there may be more. In fact, there's always more. And that's what I really try to get people to understand is you can't afford to stop. I mean, you can, but why would you? Because the more umbilical cords you cut, the closer you get to our Lord, rubber bands you cut, the closer you get to our Lord, the better life is, the more truth you see. It's so liberating, right?
Yes.
Well,
I love what you're saying, Doctor. And Bob, I want you to follow this up. But I totally agree with you that if you had to come back to the heart of the issue, trust would be at the heart of the issue. The Catechism even teaches that, where what is the fall? And when the church describes the fall, it's where Adam and Eve let trust in their Creator die in their heart, and they started to doubt His goodness. So trust issues are at the heart of it. And I've noticed that in my clinical practice and in working with people over all these years. It's like trust is such a heartbeat of everything. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're encountering the effects of broken trust in the body, and the body is manifesting the broken trust. And then you're going in via the body to get to the wound of trust, inviting healing there, the Lord to heal there, and then the body reveals or manifests the change of the soul, which echoes exactly what we believe about human anthropology, that we're body soul. So if you affect one, it affects the other, and vice versa. So, a simple, overly simplified way to say it would be, as I take care of my body, I'm also taking care of my soul. If I eat well, it will positively impact my prayer life. And that seems like a big leap, I think, for some people. But what you're saying is, no, man, in the clinical work that you're doing over and over and over and over again, you're seeing the deep link between body, soul, and all of these things. And that's cool. When a person, what happened to my knee? What'd you do to my knee? I didn't do anything. It's like, it was a healed trust. Jesus did something to your knee via how the body holds onto emotional wounds.
Yeah.
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah. This excites me so much. In Be Healed, I write about the whole person perspective of healing. And I talk about my journey of trying to find doctors who can treat me, and only going to those doctors, because I've seen what happens with the traditional kind of treatment where you're treating symptoms. And so when I met Dr. Tom and I met Dr. Chuck, I was just so excited to see a doctor who's so faithful in integrating all this. And that's where I entrust myself. Talk about trust. I don't trust somebody who just wants to treat a symptom of mine because it's not going to help me. But I can trust a doctor who loves Jesus, who understands that holistic approach. And I've probably been 3 times, Chuck, that you've treated me. And then we've consulted at other times. And, I went through this process. We were working on my body, working on my breathing. And he had his hands on, he asked me to go through traumas. And I went through all these old traumas that I've talked about. And none of them were it. And then I started talking about the trauma that I have when I'm working with somebody and they're suicidal.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, that got activated.
Mm.
And I could feel the getting stirred inside of myself.
Right.
And then as we prayed with it, the Lord brought me back to the fire when I was 6 years old. And there's still blocks there. I'm not healed there. I realize it's probably the root issue in my health issues.
Mm.
And I haven't been able to go back there. So it's a trauma at such a young age where there's dissociation and there's probably vows and there's all kind of stuff. But just in those couple of minutes, Chuck was able to facilitate that movement between the places where the traumas were healed.
Mm.
We walked through several traumas that have already been healed to the unhealed trauma and where the roots are, which is what we do all the time in our work. But it was beautiful for him to be able to connect it to what was going on in my body and the fatigue that I go through and the autoimmune problems. And, it's just like, wow, this is just beautiful to see a doctor that open to the Holy Spirit to be able to help me.
Dr. Goodhart used to always say, the body never lies if you ask the right question.
Wow.
And that profound, because most of the time we never ask the right question. We ask pretty stupid questions, but in our weakness, God, if we're open, it's amazing, those questions. And that's what's happening is we're asking different questions now, especially the body and soul. That changed everything.
Yeah, human means body soul. I don't know how you put it together quick enough to make them combine. But anyway, what you mentioned earlier, and I know this is something that's really popular, and maybe I'm veering off course, but maybe you can link it all back together for me. I've noticed in more naturopathic kind of things where people are really into understanding their blood chemistry. And I heard you say chemistries, and I'm assuming that's what you mean, where you get a big blood work done and you're seeing where all the things are. And then my experience is that a lot of people say, I need to be supplementing with this and that and this and that. Is what you're finding meaning, I don't need the supplements, I just need to do the work with the emotional body work? Or is it a both and? Or talk us through that a little bit.
Right. So the body we are body and soul, or body soul.
Yeah.
And so that body still needs, right? But I will say, and this is an important point, and I haven't had enough time and enough hours. I wish I had more time with patients because there's just too many. But it would be this. I have noticed that when you do a healing that is soul healing, that does change that nutrient need. It does change that.
Interesting.
But let's say this patient's on statin drugs or something. Well, they need coenzyme because statins destroy that ubiquinone in them. It just happens. So you do have to attend to all of it. You can't separate because we are both. But it does mitigate the amount and what we need. And I don't know. I mean, I wish I had more time. I wish I could just do that alone in my practice. And I'm sure that I could change that outcome. And unfortunately, so when we talk about blood chemistry, we do that. I find it fascinating that we do, what needs to be studied is blood, urine, saliva, and stools. And there's these big labs out there, that actually do in-depth studies that reveal so much. And when we do hormone panels on a patient, you go, wow, you can't believe how messed up people are. I mean, it's like they are getting through life on just pure determination and whatever. And unfortunately nowadays, as you know, with suicide like it is, because they can't anymore.
Yeah.
But they're messed up. I can't begin to share how messed up these chemistries are.
Yeah. Well, that's sad.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And if I could just explain what you described is sometimes when the psychology shifts spiritually, where the trauma is removed, the supplements change, because before then, the body's draining the nutrients, right? It's just like it's so exhausted and it's draining the resources. It's draining the resources that are there. And so once that part is restored, then the normal amount of resources can feed that body in that place.
100%. Well said. And that's exactly it. It's if you got the gas pedal to the floor, you're just going to burn through the gas fast. You've got to get the pedal, your foot off that pedal, because you're just burning through everything of what limited supplies there are. It's amazing.
It's we're what I love to do on the podcast, which I think drives listeners crazy, is give them just enough to where they want to listen more. And so I'm feeling that moment where I'm like, oh, people are probably really interested. Let's start to end the conversation, because then the fun part is that when we have you back, then we can say you have to go listen to part 1, so that part 2 we can dive into greater depth and detail with some of these things. But this might be a gigantic question that's way off, but I know for me, when I approach all of these things, and I know it from the psychological perspective, because I've done that's my field, and I'm familiar and used to that, even the theology stuff. Why is it? Maybe this is too difficult, but why is it that modern medicine is willing to go so way off course? Now, I don't want to necessarily go conspiracy theory, but I think a lot of people, and maybe the conspiracy theories are true, but my point being, it's when you're used to hearing something described in a way like, what do you mean? I need my statin, and I need my antidepressant, and I need blah, blah, blah. And in some ways it feels like we've been taught that is the case. And so we're just used to it. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault, because we're so used to hearing something in a particular way over and over and over and over and over again, that it can almost sound weird when you say something contrary. Like a mainstream person can be bothered by, what are you talking about, that emotions, and why is that the case, that we've separated body and soul to such a degree that when you reintegrate them, it almost sounds weird? You follow what I'm getting at? I don't know if it's a fair question.
That's a great question. It's right on. I mean, we love the fact that we're not fighting flesh and blood, but powers and principalities, right?
Yeah.
So these cataracts block a lot of stuff. And I will say that, first of all, this is never an attack on a doctor and his methodology of just giving drugs for symptoms.
Sure.
I disagree with that teaching, but that's how they were taught. So they're literally only doing what they were taught. Standard of care, put everything into a cookbook. This is what you do for this. You never see the whole person. Remember I said in the beginning, you have to look at everything about the person. You can't separate, but they do. You have an earache, you have tinnitus, you have heart and pain, angina, or whatever. Here's what you take for it. It never once asks the question, and no patient's been taught this. The question to the doctor should be, why do you have angina? Not, here's your nitro, or here's your next advanced study. So the doctor doesn't know any different. I had dinner with a cardiologist 5-6 years ago. He's a surgeon at the hospital. And he said to me, when we got done talking, he goes, how do you know all this stuff? And I said, how is it you don't? It was basic things, that which minerals and vitamins affect rate and rhythm of the heart. And so he didn't know any of that. And he's doing open heart surgery on high schoolers that are 400 pounds. You see, these need to be addressed. And Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, he's got the 3 stages of truth. There's that. The first stage is ridicule, and then the second stage is violent opposition, and then the third stage, of course, is that it's accepted as self-evident. It goes through those 3 stages. The thing is, how long does the stage last? And truth doesn't change; it just cycles around, maybe 1,000 years, and you can go through this all again. It never stops cycling. But right now, we're in this violent opposition stage. Why is Kennedy so popular? Right now, the number one thing patients are saying to me is they're talking about Trump, but far more, they're talking about Kennedy, that he's going to actually change this healthcare system. I mean, we are the most technologically advanced nation in the world, but our mortality rate in infants and kids, and even having babies anymore, is so low. It's tragic, I should say, our health.
Yes.
It's so bad. And that's what people are interested in. So to answer your question, it's the doctors who have been taught this way, and that's a money machine running this thing. I don't care what you want to say. The trillions that are going into this system. Look at first time I saw a drug ad was in Arizona. I don't watch TV, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't do TV.
Yeah, sure.
And we went to visit my in-laws, and they sat down and wanted to watch some show. I don't know what it was, and they had a commercial. And I started, and it was a drug ad, and I've never seen one in my life. And this was just maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago. I don't know what it was.
Wow.
And I said I started laughing in the room, and they go, "What are you laughing about?" I go, "Are you not catching this joke? I mean, they went through this litany of it can cause A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and maybe even death, but it might be right for you." I go, "Well, you can't sell that. That's stupid. I mean, who in their right mind? It can cause all these symptoms, but it might be right for you." I couldn't figure that out. It made no sense. I had never heard it before.
Right.
Turns out,
right,
it works because it can take your pain away.
Wow.
People want to take their pain away. They don't want to. They don't want the discipline. Which reminds me of I had an office girl like 20 years ago or more. She says, "Doctor, everything you say is kind of like a discipline." And I go, "Isn't that what life is? It's a discipline just getting up. It's a discipline." Yeah.
Yes.
What we offer is not an instant relief of your headache. Sometimes that happens. But what we offer is a way to start working on the body to normalcy, to bring it back to normalcy, to health, so that things become clear. When you take an aspirin, you haven't cleared up anything. Do you realize what load you just put on the stomach, the liver, the kidney? You're affecting all these organisms. Back to that central nervous system. That's what I treat. That's what I do in my office. I treat the central nervous system. Everything you do treats that central nervous system. And we can't. And every time we do something artificial, synthetic, we are deviating, going away from how you were born. There was nothing synthetic when you were born.
Yes.
Did I just go off on the
No, you totally did. It's confirming something that I've learned in the psychological world, and I'm like, of course it applies. And that is, if you don't understand what you're helping, you will likely not help it, whatever it is. And so as the definition and understanding of what it means to be a human person gets wackier and wackier, then it makes logical sense that the solutions to help, in this case, the human person, get wackier and wackier. And so there's no question right now to me that we've lost the basic understanding of what it means to be human. That's part of why we do this podcast and why we have taught it and done it the way that we've done it, is because if you don't have an adequate anthropology, you will in no way be able to help heal someone. And so, of course, medicine is under an adequate anthropology. But what medical practice, and I don't know, I just assume that doesn't happen because it didn't happen in the psychological world, where you spent zero time on understanding what the thing is that you're treating, in this case, a person, but all the time in treating it. But I'm going, if you don't know what it is, you can't actually take care of it because you don't know what it needs to actually thrive. So the loss of the understanding of the human person is central to why we've gotten, I think, where we've gotten. And this is why John Paul II is considered a hero, because he put right back in front of people's faces and hearts, we can't forget what we are. We have to remember what we are and who we are, and then we can respond to that in all of the unique fields that we specialize in order to love the human person well. And you see that everywhere, the misunderstanding of the human person. So I'm going, right, of course it's there again.
And if anybody's questioning this, go to the Catechism where it talks about the human person. And everything that we've just been talking about is right there.
Yes. I just want to say thank you, because I imagine that you've had your ups and downs, and in these times and in your lifetime, you being older than me, and I've experienced it somewhat, it's not always popular to stand in what is true, regardless of how the culture responds to it. And healthy discussion, I love. Disagreement is healthy for the whole thing. But it doesn't always end there in the healthy discussions and going, let's really talk about what it means to be human. And I can hear you, Dr. Chuck, talking about your anthropology is a given and it informs your practice. And then you get into all the practice. But if I don't appreciate and adhere and honor your anthropology, your practice can sound like, what? what the heck? And I think that's why people go, what are you talking about? But in my world, I go, oh, that makes total sense, because I've seen that in the reverse in the psychological world, where the physical is being negatively impacted because of anxiety, like pumping Gaviscons because you have an anxiety problem and you don't realize why you can't digest food because your stomach acids are so high because your anxiety is so high all the time. Like, that's a very small thing in my little world where I've gone, oh, that makes sense. You're anxious all the time. So like you're saying, you're in fight or flight 24/7. That's not good for the body and hard to just function well, Bob, final thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could add something and then give you an opportunity, Chuck, to final thoughts. One of the things that I love about Dr. Chuck and Dr. Tom is they are more excited about their practice after 40 years than they were when they started. And they're more alive, and they're more learning, and they're more growing. And we see so many doctor friends who are so burnt out by the system and feel like they're just there as diagnosticians and pill pushers and controlled by the pharmaceutical industry by having to do this much. And Chuck and Tom, as I've known them as people, are thriving in their life. And I think that's the biggest evidence of as they said, it's not just the patients that are being healed, but they're being healed every day, working with the patients, and people are flocking to them. They can't get enough.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Chuck, I'm not going to say where can we find you on social media, because if you don't watch TV, I'm going to assume that's not the way that people get a hold of you. But I'm assuming that if somebody just wanted to, let me ask it in this final question, and this we can wrap up here. If someone wanted to learn more about you or what you're talking about, and just to inform themselves and grow, where would you send them?
Wow. Jake, you gave me the most complicated question to end this with.
Oh, wow. Okay, sorry.
And you did, because unfortunately, even in what I do, there was such a shift away, and it started probably, I would say easily 25 years ago. It started shifting in a different direction that I'm not going to attack, but I just don't align with it. And so my son, Dr. Scott, does it so well. He's so good at what he does, and he's just got that same clear thinking, and so he's wonderful that way. But I am every day asked, probably like you guys are, I want to see you. I want to, whatever. And I you can't. And I don't know where this is going and how to learn more. I do hand out something that I wrote, kind of like a sheet, basically on this, the trust, the wound thing, and I like it. I mean, it's pretty nice, and I hand it to patients.
Nice.
And at the end, at the end of it, it says, if you want to learn more about this, see Jake and Bob, watch their podcast, hear them abiding together, and read the books, and and Dr. Lehman, and I refer that way because I think that soul part is the most important, but the physical part is equally as important, in many ways. Corinthians 6, it says we are the Holy Spirit, right? It needs to be taken care of with. Nobody's being kind to their bodies anymore. And my gosh, what a gift this pod to carry our soul. And we treat it like it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So I wish there was more people out there. And I don't know how to answer that one other than maybe I'll write a book. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's totally fair. What I do want to do is I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on. And thank you for all that you've done and for your service in your corner of the vineyard. We're with you. And it's a pleasure to try to advance the kingdom of God and bring the Lord at hand to his people in all the ways that we do. So listeners, we hope that this blessed you, and looking forward to, we'll have one more doctor in our series. So I'm looking forward to finishing that. And so hope this blessed you. And we want to bless your journey in your physical and spiritual health. And we pray that you take that seriously. So we'll talk to you again soon.